Hello, I'm here with Esha Metiary, and I would love for Esha to introduce herself before I interview her.
Yeah, let's quickly do that. I'm Esha, I'm 31, and currently I'm a conversation designer at bol.com, which is one of the Netherlands' biggest retailers, and I'm also a consultant at Independer. Very
Awesome.
happy to be here.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much. So I don't know if you've seen some of these interviews I've been doing so far, but I start with a quick fire quiz. The
Mhm.
last time, Emily Uematsu Bantaf managed to do it in 30 seconds. Jason took 15 minutes for combined, well, it wasn't quite, it was maybe 12 minutes for three questions. So it should have been about a minute and
Mhm.
a half. And of course, it doesn't really matter. The most important thing is that you give your honest answer and hopefully someone takes something useful from it. But please aim for roughly 30 seconds. Okay?
Mhm.
Can I give you the first one?
Definitely.
Awesome. Okay, Isha. So please tell me, what is the most useful thing you use at work?
Well, honestly, it's not a thing. It's people. The people that surround me are most useful because conversation design is teamwork, and it's so valuable to discuss your ideas and your work with people who are in and outside your team to get that new perspective.
Yeah, perfect. That's an amazing answer. Uh, and can you give, I know this is like a sub question, which I didn't warn you about, but it's very interesting for me. Can you
Mhm.
give a rough idea of how many people you have to interact with?
To do your job properly, I
Yeah.
think at least four or five.
Okay, super. And then that doesn't include the user research and so on,
No,
right?
no,
So
no.
yeah, but the people who are working within your team, four or five.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Amazing answer. Such a good answer that you've given me so many other thoughts. Um, so Esha, second question. Please, what surprised you most when you first started designing conversations?
That one is simple. What you think the customer will say is never actually what the customer says. It's always something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You really can't predict, right?
Mm-mm.
Not just the way they might say a response that's in line with what you expected, but they might say it in a completely different way, or they might just say something completely different.
How people work, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I often feel like people who think conversation design is easy or simple, we should just say to them, go and look at your like WhatsApp messages and
Hmm.
see if you actually predicted what your conversation partner was going to say next,
Yeah.
because it's basically impossible, right?
It is, it is.
Yeah. Cool. I know that I'm bogging you down here. You're perfectly given like succinct answers and I'm making these last for ages.
That's okay.
Okay. Cool. So, may I ask the third one?
Hmm.
Cool. Please, can you nominate one conversation designer that we should all know about, and extra bonus points if it's someone who isn't generally well known?
um, well, I'd like to nominate the whole community, of course, but that's not the answer you're looking for. I just want to give a big shout out to every conversation designer and everyone in the conversational space because it's such a happy little lovely community. But if I'd have to nominate one person, it would definitely be Coraline Krak. She's on the
Okay.
top of my list.
Cool.
She's a colleague of mine. Sadly, she's leaving the company within a couple of weeks,
Okay.
but she's taught me so much, not only about the daily chatbot business, but also she's guided me on my path of personal growth. So definitely Coralina.
Okay, cool. Great answer. Cool. And the great thing is that I've never come across her before, so now I'm going to
Yes,
have to go and check her out.
yes.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So that was 30 seconds ago, and I think you passed with flying colors. I think
Mm,
absolutely spot on. So great start. So now let's go into the actual full interview.
mm-hmm.
I maybe to give this a bit of context, I was at Voice 22 in Arlington and I was speaking with Micah Chronofecha and Claire Van Leuven. I think that's how you pronounce her surname. I'm not
Van
totally
Leeuwen,
sure.
but yeah.
Okay. So not at all, but so I was chatting with them And I was saying to them, VUX World, Kane asked me to start this podcast series interviewing conversation designers, and they both said, speak to Esha Metiary. And I was like, all right, great, cool. And like, what might she want to talk about? And they said that you have made some like really insightful points around whether bots should have political opinions.
I
Um,
have, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that like for me, this is a fascinating topic because it touches on many things like branding and persona, and of course utterance writing. And I think many designers at some point will probably face this challenge of like, should I incorporate political content or some kind of political element into the bot, and
Hmm.
what might the repercussions be? So this is super exciting. I think we should start quite general just to make sure I'm understanding where you're coming from with this.
Hmm.
So please, Esha, could you tell me what does the term persona mean to you, and maybe specifically with bots?
Yeah. Um, well, it's a facade, isn't it? It's how we perceive one another, what we choose to present to the outside world. And I think Carl Jung describes it as a mask that changes within certain contexts or circumstances. And all the world's a stage, and we're all merely players. So yeah, facade. A persona is a facade.
Okay, cool. And so within the practical terms of designing this facade, what do you feel is the purpose of a bot having the persona or facade?
Hmm. It's multifaceted. I have a lot of purposes and a lot of goals for a bot's persona, but for me, it's the heart of the chatbot. It's what gives it its purpose, its
Hmm.
soul. A bot persona is not only what makes a bot understandable or maybe even likable to the customer, but creating a bot persona also gives us conversation designers the major benefit to actually step into the shoes of the brand we're designing for. So talking about the Dutch market, and I don't know how it is outside of the Netherlands, but here teams are changing all the time. People moving
Hmm.
from job to job, either getting laid off or teams are expanding. We all need to know the bot that we're designing for by heart, the brand that we do it for. New colleagues need to be onboarded. They need to familiarize themselves with things like tone of voice and characteristics, motivations. So for me, it's really important to understand that I'm not the only one working on the chatbot, and so having a document or a guide that describes the persona on hand is very useful to onboard new team members.
Yeah, I totally get you.
But there's
Um,
more if you want to know it. I
I
have
would
a
love to know
lot of
it.
reasons. Yeah. Um, Secondly, it saves us time and prevents double work.
Hmm.
So we won't be going back and forth discussing certain characteristics or standard vocabulary or a particular way of writing. It's all there in the persona guide, like some kind of absolute truth.
Hmm. Hmm.
And about absolute truth, it's very, very important to keep that within the company because a lot of companies struggle to retain good colleagues, but they also struggle with retaining good knowledge.
Yeah.
About persona that's known by all ensures the safety of knowledge and possibly also the expansion of it. So you can't prevent people leaving your company, but you can prevent or at least minimize a knowledge leak. So why not use it? And if we're speaking about businesses and companies, then for me, it shows a certain degree of maturity. Having a persona shows that a brand has put some good thoughts in core values, target audiences, appearances, and goals. And if your brand or company hasn't done it, it will show in how the bot presents itself. So again, that
Hmm.
facade.
Yeah.
And one major driver for me to create or have a bot persona is our big friends, stakeholders. They are very
Hmm.
important. Having a bot persona and being able to explain all this, what you're doing and why you're doing it, and why the bot is doing the things it does to your stakeholders will create a support base with them. Um, and probably get you some good money to expand your work further. And it contributes to making the bot understood by the whole company and making it an integral part of your communication strategy.
Yeah, totally.
Hmm.
Totally. You've touched on many things that I would love to know more about. Because there's one word you used which I don't hear often in our industry, and that was soul. You were talking about the bot's soul,
Hmm.
and um, you know, I think that could be a very interesting area. But also, as you were talking, you were saying that the team, like, members leave, people come and go, but the bot has to stay consistent. And I was
Hmm.
starting to just imagine that essentially we are building or designing, creating a new employee for the company.
Definitely. Yeah. So the reasons I just named, it's all about why using a bot persona internally, but there are also a lot of external reasons. And so what can we say about the use of a bot persona to the outside world? Our customers, which are actually most important.
Yeah.
Um, I think that we're incredibly good at pigeonholing. Gives us the capability to understand the world around us by making these subconscious connections and discovering patterns between things or humans or basically everything.
Hmm.
Um, so most neurotypical people aim to close the distance, a gap between themselves and living and non-living things. Like, how do I familiarize myself with that? And we humans do this automatically. And as a conversation designer, you want to prevent your customers attributing characteristics to your chatbot. You want to be in charge of that narrative as much as you can. So don't let the customer decide your bot's persona. So very clearly document the persona and let it work for you. Um, and this will work for your brand and propagating your brand, whether it's internal branding or external branding. Your digital human, your voice assistant, or your chatbot is that essential part of your company and brand. The thing you just said.
You're talking about having the bot persona, like, clearly documented, and
Hmm.
having this, like, basically imagining this character and then
Hmm.
kind of making it concrete.
Hmm. Yes.
Can you tell me, when you're imagining this character, and I don't mean, like, how would you advise people go through that process of imagining this persona? Like, would you recommend that they think of a human, of a person, or are we aiming for something else? This
I
is
think,
probably my most favorite question in the whole industry because I find it fascinating.
yeah, it's a difficult one. It should never really be human, but definitely humanized.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, we're looking for that connection with animate and inanimate things, attributing characteristics to inanimate objects or animals or plants. Um, and it's a difficult word, and I never can pronounce it, anthropomorphism.
Yeah, that one.
Um,
It's a hard one.
so the thing is, and it's a couple of things actually. You can never create a round character for a chatbot because the basics of a round character is that they go through a certain development. They evolve as a person or as a character, and a chatbot can never really actually do that. But we can give it a backstory. It can understand the user's needs, or it can actually express its own needs. But then we could never make it actually human, and we shouldn't aim for that because I don't have to tell you anything about the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Um, but it also has to do with the type of users that we have.
So I think what we've been discussing so far, we're kind of setting the scene for going a bit deeper into certain areas.
Hmm.
And um, you know, considering political opinions, the topic that I would really like to get into with you. Um,
Hmm.
so when we're talking about political opinions, what exactly are we talking about?
So inside the chatbot spectrum or outside of it,
Is it different?
I think it is. Um,
Okay.
because we or I just established that a chatbot should never be humanized, but never human. And there are a couple of things in play here. So, first of all, I think that a bot, when it comes to small talk, because this is what it is, small talk, um, should never speak when not spoken to.
Hmm.
So it will only say something when prompted.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot to say about that, but we can also say something about what's the use of having your chatbot being able to ventilate that political opinion or not, and what use is it? And the majority of your users will probably use your bot for a supported use case or to solve a problem. But there will also be a significant group that will test the capabilities of the bot. And a bot simply answering questions like, how's the weather, or what's your name, or I don't understand. We know that by now. And it won't cut it anymore.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of customers that take the extra step and will try to test or lure out the character of the bot by asking them these difficult questions because that's what they are.
Yeah.
And that's basically where we get into the what should I call it? The rules of a discussion because um, the rules of a basic rule of the discussion is that um, both parties are receptive to what the other is saying, which is almost never the case in an online discussion or an online disagreement. Um, so also the bot cannot be receptive. It can hear the customer, but it can never actually do something what the customer says. Also, research has found that when a discussion is about politics or religion or something else that is fairly different from person to person, there is no receptiveness.
Hmm.
So it's not a fair debate. It's not a fair discussion.
Yeah.
But I still do think that chatbots should answer political questions or at least have a political opinion.
Yeah, it makes me think that if somebody asks a bot a political question, they're basically asking the brand that owns the bot that question.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, definitely. Um, So, yeah, as a brand, if you are engaged or politically inclined, definitely answer that question as if your bot should does answer it. But if your brand does not engage in public debate at all, or never has, it's safe for the bot to drop the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then again, uh, as a conversation designer, I must say that please don't design the conversation um, to have the bot say, I don't understand. But up for something neutral, like I cannot help with that.
Yeah, yeah, I get you. Because
And
the word understand has many connotations, right? It can mean like explicitly understanding the words or the meaning,
yes,
but it can also be something like I don't understand you, I don't understand what who you are or something else.
brilliantly put. Yeah, that's exactly it.
What I'm thinking here is are bots inherently apolitical from the start? Like is a bot as soon as it's created a political being? Or is it kind of a blank slate in that area?
They are a blank slate. Yeah, they are the
Yeah.
way we designed them to be.
Yeah, it just the only reason I'm wondering a bit more about this is because of the discussions around like sexual politics
Hmm.
with the feminization of I don't know if that's the best word, but basically most voice assistants have a female voice,
Hmm.
and the way that that sort of interacts with society and how we communicate with these basically subservient robots, but they're characterized as female. So I
Hmm.
think that maybe for me that's the only area where the bot, a voice bot from the start, actually has some kind of political meaning, political, impact.
It has,
I'm not.
and it
Yeah.
does. Yeah. There are a lot of companies that try to design their bot and their persona or voice assistant from the get-go to be neutral and inclusive. But when designing, at least I do, you always put up your design in front of a jury, the customers, and let
Mhm.
them judge what you've designed for them. I actually know of a company that designed a male black chatbot and
Cool.
asked the customers what they actually thought of the persona they've designed. And the customers came back that, yeah, when we chat with you, this company, we expect a white, blonde female. And as
Wow.
much as they love their original design, the customer is essentially what you're designing for, so they went with the white, blonde female.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really tricky one because
Hmm.
it sounds like they were really trying to be to consider, all the possibilities rather than the sort of stereotypes that we've been working with, but the
Yes.
customers wanted what's kind of like the stereotype for our industry.
Yeah, but then the question for you is, do you think that as a conversation designer, we should break away from that and ignore the customer in this matter?
That's a really good question. I my answer to that, from what I understand about the industry now, is that we're going to get to the point where our personas, or the personas we design, sorry, are going to be more fluid and actually
Hmm.
personalized to different customers' needs.
Hmm.
But that still sounds like science fiction, because I think like then the question would be how are conversation designers gonna create, like, I don't know, 100 personas or something like that. It's totally possible. It's just gonna be like really casting for a movie or something, like
Yeah.
getting a huge roll call. Totally possible, but definitely a bit more complex. So that would be my personal answer to that. Um, and what would you say?
Well, you hit the spot when you said it, we live in an age of personalization. I think even hyper personalization. So we aim to design everything that we do as good as it fits to the customer's needs. But I do think that there's still some responsibilities left with the companies, with the brands, to actually educate or force a particular view on their customers. So there's this particular type of a brand or company, and they're called disruptors.
Hmm.
And disruptors, they basically do what they want, and if you don't agree or you don't like it, then well, thank you, but you don't need to be our customer then.
Yeah.
And it's not a new way of thinking, but I think that this is also a discipline or at least a thought that we can apply to our chatbots. If this is not the way you like things to be done, then well, thank you, but this is what we stand for, and we won't
Hmm.
change it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great point. I think for like some brands would be afraid of that, right?
Oh,
Because
definitely.
they're like, we should be open to everybody because we basically want as many customers as possible.
Hmm.
But I think I'm now trying to think of an example, but if you see a brand making a stance, it often makes me, from my experience, feel more strongly about that brand, about how much I like them.
Definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I'm just struggling.
you either like them or you're not, and if you do, it creates this certain kind of loyalty. You will return to that brand over and over.
Yeah, this is super interesting because it makes me think of, because essentially the persona we're making, um, yeah, from the outset, you basically do have to consider that some people just aren't going to like this thing because we have that experience when we meet new people, right? It's
Hmm.
it's it's a sort of chemistry thing, and as much as we try to be open and get on with as many people as possible, sometimes there's just no click. Um, but still the bot has to be useful because it's
Oh,
you know
definitely.
its purpose. It's really, yeah, like this is such a fascinating area. I love this. um what I would say is, considering the counter argument, wouldn't it be better for bots to just stay completely out of politics, because these are basically discussions that are as old as time, and they keep continuing, and maybe it would make our jobs a lot easier if we just
Oh,
didn't engage.
well, life wasn't meant to be easy, right?
No,
Um,
sure. I'm playing devil's advocate.
Thank you for that. um, So stay out of politics or socially difficult topics, social difficult topics.
Yeah.
Again, speak when spoken to, and if they're not prompted to give a response, then they shouldn't. But I also believe that chatbots or voice assistants should never enable or enforce hurtful, stereotypical views. Of course, there's a small chance of chatbots leading or changing people's minds, but um, they can be outspoken if something happens or they get a reply from a customer that is not inherently good natured. Then yes, they can speak up. But
Hmm.
always from the brand's perspective, they never should educate the customer, never do it on a personal note, or it should always be what the brand thinks or what the brand believes, and the bot has to ensure that that is reflected in the way it responds.
Yeah, totally, totally. The thing that just popped into my head is that silence is making a stance. You know, if the bot is silent on a point, it's basically saying, uh, not explicitly, but saying, for some reason, we're not going to talk about that.
Exactly that. Or
Yeah.
I can't answer that, or just like that. Indeed, I
Yeah.
agree.
No, totally. Wow. Wow. One thing that I'm wondering though, like, um, slightly less playing devil's advocate, but considering kind of from an empathetic point of view,
Hmm.
if bots, if we chose to not have bots speak politically, couldn't that kind of engender a sort of safe space for users where they know that they're coming here to get something done, and they know that basically like this isn't the arena for politics. We're just going to keep that out, and you know, everybody's going to have a good time and nobody's going
Hmm.
to get hurt.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit further?
Yeah, sure. So considering that, you know, if I walk out the door, uh, and you know, I live in the Czech Republic, but could happen anywhere. If I walk out the door and bump into someone on the street, there could, you know, there's a chance that if we start talking, we might disagree on something,
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, like race, gender, class, whatever. You know, any kind of sort of political arena. Um, and so that's a given when I speak with a person
Hmm.
that we could get into those topics. And so if we're designing bots and we have the choice whether to include that or not, uh, isn't there an argument for leaving it out so that users who might be struggling with these things in their normal day-to-day life, when they come to the bot, they know that they're just like as a sort of as a standard, like bots just don't talk about that.
But then the customer wouldn't talk about it either because they know that the bot wouldn't give a response or an answer.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm aiming at. That if our industry was in a, I don't know, I guess it would have to be explicit agreement because someone's always going to go ahead and do it anyway and make a very political bot.
Hmm.
But if we were in some sort of agreement that, you know, our bots, we agree that bots just won't talk about politics, and then customers would learn over time that that's basically sort of what you don't talk about with bots. You don't get into politics. I know that I'm creating a quite vague scenario that would require the agreement of an entire like international industry, which is quite absurd. I'm aware of that, but as a what if scenario, um, wouldn't it be nice that bots would be a safe space for users where politics aren't on the menu?
So if we're speaking about bots only, then yes, definitely. I think that all people, everyone should have a place to vent or to just feel safe, regardless of your background, race, age, gender, and everything. However, on the other side of the chatbot voice assistant or digital human is us. And as a person, I feel that this should not happen. We as people cannot stay quiet. in case of abuse or when something is going on that is socially unacceptable. And I think that we could let that shimmer through in our chatbots, because also I think that we wouldn't be designing for that brand or designing that product if we did not agree with what that product stands for. So yes, a bot should be in nature a safe space, but as we're designing it, we should not agree with that.
Yeah, wow, you are giving such amazing answers. This is
I
wonderful.
I think that this is very unsatisfying because it's not a black or white yes or no answer.
Well, that's politics, right?
It is.
Political discussions so easily get into this kind of binary yes no, like Republican Democrat, in Britain, Tory, Labour, like it so easily gets into that. But it's always the shades of color in between, you know?
It's definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So I don't believe that anyone should do anything that goes against their own beliefs, of course, within the moral and legal limits. But when you, as a designer, get to ask to design dialogues or to leave them out, or anything that you don't wholeheartedly agree with, then you should politely refuse. That is
Hmm.
not the place for you.
Yeah. Wow. Super cool stuff. So, we've spoken about the reasons for bots to have politically aware material. Can I say it that
Hmm.
way? Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So those are the reasons why you might want to consider, like any conversation designer might want to consider this in their designs. So
Hmm.
taking that a step further, if they did decide they were going to do that, how would you recommend they approach it? Because of course this is a very sensitive area. So, how would you recommend a conversation designer approaches integrating political content into their design?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, So first of all, I think you need to go back to um, what your brand does. And so if your brand does not engage in public debate at all, and it never has, it's safer for the bot to just not answer the question or to drop it.
Hmm.
If it does engage in public debate, then the same standard should be applied to our bot. So the answers that the company gives in public, or in its commercials, or in the merchandise it has, that can be applied to the bot as well. Um,
Yeah.
But if this condition applies, then the conversation designers should still be very wary about what subjects to discuss and which not. Um, I'm trying to think of a company that has done one thing for one thing. That doesn't sound right. I'm trying to think of a company that has spoken up about a certain subject, but hasn't spoken up about anything else. Um, but I cannot tell or say anything from the top of my mind. But the thing I'm trying to say is that you cannot go all out on, for example, Black Lives Matter,
Hmm.
but not have any answers to gender debate related questions.
Yeah.
Um, so you have to be very wary about that.
Yeah, totally. I totally get you. It's like why do they care so much about one subject
That
when
yes,
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And so I guess for a conversation designer facing this challenge, you kind of have to hope that perhaps the marketing and legal teams have documentation on the brand's stances on things. Otherwise,
yes.
it's going to be a lot of research, which of course is totally valid and should be done. It's just even deciding where to start. Um, yeah, but um, it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
hopefully that work has already been done for you,
Should
and all
be,
you need
should
to
be.
do is design the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Because the worst case scenario would be designing for a brand that has a kind of scattergun approach to
Oh man.
politics. That would be like, how can I draw a line that averages between all of these views? Yeah, that would be a challenge.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting topic for a next discussion is how to break through all the silos that we have in a company, because a chatbot is somewhere down the line in communications or digital, maybe somewhere, but it should be an integral part of your company's communication strategy and of your company in a whole.
Yeah, No, totally. I'm glad you suggested that because that's actually touches on what I was saying earlier in our conversation. So I think I should probably just interview you on it again, which is how many people does it take to make a bot? Because I think that would be super useful for people even beyond designers. But in so I'll are you up for that?
Ah, can I think on? Can I sleep on that, please? No, no. I've loved this conversation so far, and yeah, why not?
Cool. I totally put you on the spot. I'm sorry for that.
No, no, that's fine.
um, but of course we can cut this if you want to.
Mm-mm.
But last question. So we spoke about, if a designer had to write politically aware material for a bot and how they might approach that. And let's take that example scenario even further and imagine a designer who has to write politically aware material that they don't agree with. They don't
Yep.
personally agree with. Uh, that's a very tricky situation to be in, right? Because as a writer for a bot, you have to kind of emulate the bot in your own mind, like slightly become it to think how it would say these things.
Mm-hmm.
How would like what do you think about that? How do you think a designer might approach that?
I Well, as a designer, you have to agree with your product 100%. So in this market, I know there are a lot of tech layoffs, but we conversation designers are a rare species. You'd have to think to yourself, is this the kind of company that I want to work for? Are these the kinds of conversations I want to design? Is this really what my company wants? So please open the conversation with the one that gave you the assignment to design those conversations. And if the answer is still yes, we want you to design that, I think that it is time to reconsider your position with that company and find something that you or a company that actually makes you happy and makes something that you believe in.
Yeah.
So still, yes, I would politely refuse. I wouldn't do
No,
it.
I totally get you. I totally get you. I think, yeah, that's basically a personal political stance, right?
Hmm.
Because someone could be in the position that they're basically kind of stuck in that job. Does
Hmm.
happen, like not seeing their other options. So they're like, I'm not sure if I can leave here, so I'm going to have to build this. But
Yeah.
I don't expect you to be able to advise them on how to do that because that's a real challenging crisis, right? It's
Oh, definitely. But can you actually ever design something that's good if you don't agree with it?
it's a very good question. I think, you know, I think you can always take every design exercise as a learning experience. So
Hmm.
even if you don't agree with it, or I mean, if you don't believe in it, then basically you probably have fundamental reasons for that, and you might think it's a doomed concept, and
Hmm.
that's why you don't believe in it. But I think you can learn something from anything, and the most challenging projects are maybe the ones where you learn the most. Um, but yeah, I mean, if I was faced with that, where I had to write something that I fundamentally didn't agree with its politics, like, speaking honestly, if I had to design a bot for Donald Trump, I would struggle. I would really struggle. Um, so yeah, I think as much as I would treat it as a learning exercise, it might be, yeah, basically like you have to just say this is a job for someone else.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be something you learn about designing, but it's more about your personal growth. And I think there's a lot to be gained from understanding what doesn't make you happy or doesn't make you tick. Um, instead of learning what does make you happy. Because what does make you happy is easier to understand. It's usually smaller, and if people are asked what doesn't make you happy or um, what is it that yeah that breaks you away from a job, they usually aren't able to tell those things. So it's a valuable learning experience. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. Well, Esha, this has been brilliant. So much great stuff. It feels like anything I touch on, you're gonna bring some great insights and points. So thank you very much. It's been wonderful.